Since the dawn of humanity, mankind has sensed that it is not alone, not merely in a physical sense, but within a deeper spiritual dimension. Religions, mythologies, and ancient traditions seem to agree on one thing. There are hidden forces that watch us, shape our paths, and, in some way, imprison us. The Gnostics called these entities the Archons, the jailers of the human soul. But who are they truly? Are they merely symbols of oppression, or are they real beings as ancient as the cosmos itself? In the 2nd century, Gnostic texts preserved in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, revealed unsettling passages. There it was written that the creation of the material world was not the work of the supreme God, but of an arrogant and flawed being called Yaldabaoth. Together with his servants, the Archons, he is said to have trapped human souls in a cycle of illusion, limiting our perception of the true spiritual reality. The Apocryphon of John, one of the manuscripts discovered, declares, "The Archons cast man into great ignorance and into the bondage of the flesh in order to enslave him forever." But why do so many different cultures echo this same sense of captivity? Why is it that from Greece to Mesopotamia, and even within early Christian writings, humanity is portrayed as constantly watched, controlled, and prevented from awakening? Could this be mere coincidence? Or are we facing a truth hidden within the shadows of history? Each religion gave them a different name. Some saw them as gods, others as fallen angels, and still others recognized them as cosmic forces disguising themselves in order to dominate. What all of these accounts share is a single echo: humanity is not free. The question becomes inevitable. What if everything we know, everything we feel, every impulse of fear or desire is nothing more than a reflection shaped by these unseen jailers? Imagine for a moment that our choices are not truly our own, that what we call free will may only be a carefully designed illusion. How much of your mind truly belongs to you? This is where our journey begins, into a narrative both dark and illuminating. The story of the Archons is not merely myth, not merely philosophy. It strikes at the core of who we are and what we could become. And with every page of this ancient Gnostic legacy, a veil is lifted, revealing that the captivity of the soul may be far more real than we dare to imagine. The origin of the Archons is intertwined with the dawn of the universe, a time when light itself and shadow still struggled for dominion. To the Gnostics, the true God, the nameless Father, dwelt in a realm of absolute fullness known as the Pleroma. There, perfect beings emanated forth, called Aeons, reflections of his very essence. Yet, among these emanations, one stood apart for her boldness: Sophia, the very embodiment of wisdom. Driven by a desire to create without the permission of the Supreme Father, Sophia brought forth an imperfect being, one distorted by ignorance. This being was Yaldabaoth, described as a lion-faced serpent with a body of fire. Unlike the divine emanations, he was born outside the harmony of the Pleroma, bearing within himself the mark of imperfection. According to the Apocryphon of John, Yaldabaoth, ashamed of his misshapen form, declared, "I am God, and there is no other beside me." This arrogance would become the foundation of his tyranny. Believing himself to be the only creator, he resolved to shape the material world as a prison. And to rule over this prison, he fashioned his servants, the Archons. These entities were not born of perfection, but rather projections of error, shadows born of ignorance. They became guardians of matter, forces that govern the stars, destiny, and the cycles of life. Each Archon was given dominion over a celestial sphere, forming a kind of barrier between the human soul and the true light. Thus they emerged as jailers, not only of the body, but of consciousness itself. It is striking to see how this vision resonates across various traditions. In Sumerian mythology, for example, we find similar figures in the Anunnaki, gods said to shape and control humanity. In Jewish tradition, echoes of this same conflict appear in passages where the material world is described as flawed, subject to corruption and deception. But could this convergence be nothing more than the fruit of human imagination? Or perhaps a remnant of a hidden knowledge carried through the ages? What is truly unsettling is the persistence of this theme, that we are watched, controlled, and manipulated by forces that present themselves as divine, but are anything but. The Gnostics claim that the Archons created not only the human body, but also the illusion that surrounds it. Everything we perceive, time, need, the fear of death, is part of a carefully crafted mechanism. If this is true, the reality we believe in may be nothing more than a spiritual prison. And here the story becomes even more disturbing. If the Archons are the jailers, then who are we? Prisoners unaware of their captivity, or rebels in the making?
The Archons are not mere symbols, nor are they simply metaphors for evil. To the Gnostics, they were real cosmic intelligences, beings that act invisibly upon the human mind. The term Archon comes from the Greek word archon, meaning ruler or lord. And that is precisely what they are: hidden rulers, controllers of the material order. In many ancient writings, they are described as those who feed upon human ignorance. The Gospel of Philip, discovered at Nag Hammadi, declares, "The world was created as a prison, and its guardians are the Archons. They do not allow the soul to see the truth, for they feed upon it." This view does not portray them as physical monsters, but as subtle, almost parasitic forces that influence thoughts, emotions, and even entire societies. Each Archon carries a specific function, like the gears of a mechanism designed to keep the human soul asleep. Some control fear, others desire, others vanity or ambition. They do not need to appear before us, for their dominion manifests within our very weaknesses. Imagine for a moment that temptations, destructive impulses, and the illusions we pursue are not merely natural, but programmed to keep us captive. Writers such as Carl Gustav Jung, in studying the Gnostic texts, suggested that the Archons could be seen as dark archetypes, collective forces operating within the human unconscious. To Jung, they represented a form of cosmic psychopathy, an influence that distorts the psyche and keeps us bound to suffering. But to the Gnostics of the early Christian era, they were far more than that. They had names, symbolic faces, and attributes. Among them were Yaldabaoth, Iao Sabaoth, Adonaios Eloaios, Astaphaios, and Adonaios. Each one ruled over a celestial sphere, representing a gear in this grand mechanism of control. Their names still echo in later traditions, often transformed into divine titles. How many centuries of worship and devotion may, in truth, have been energy offered not to the supreme God, but to these spiritual jailers? How many times has humanity revered its very oppressor, believing itself to be serving the true Creator? These questions are disturbing, yet inevitable. For if the Archons exist, their most effective strategy is not open terror, but disguise. The illusion of freedom while we are in fact watched. The deception of devotion while we are in fact feeding our prison. And at the center of this web of deceit, one name rises as the root of all others: Yaldabaoth, the arrogant demiurge.
Among all the Archons, none is as feared or as frequently named as Yaldabaoth. He is the demiurge, the arrogant craftsman who shaped the material world as a prison. In the Apocryphon of John, a central text of the Gnostic tradition, his description is unsettling. He is like a lion with a face of fire and a body of serpent, and his gaze casts forth flames. This image is not merely symbolic. It reveals his hybrid and corrupted nature, born of a creation outside divine order. Yaldabaoth came forth from Sophia, the Aeon of wisdom, when she, in an act of boldness, attempted to create alone, without the permission of the Supreme Father. The result was a deformed being, lacking the fullness of light, yet powerful enough to believe himself a god. Ashamed of her creation, Sophia cast him out of the pleroma, into the void. And there, in isolation, he declared with pride, "I am God, and there is no other beside me." That phrase would echo as the very mark of his tyranny. Driven by arrogance, Yaldabaoth created the Archons as his servants, each one governing a celestial sphere. Together, they raised the material cosmos, not as an act of love, but as a prison of ignorance. To him, humanity was nothing more than an imperfect reflection, shaped from the dust of the earth, yet one to which he accidentally granted a spark of divine light, inherited from Sophia. And it is precisely this spark that torments him, for within every human being burns a fragment of the supreme divinity, something that even he, with all his power, cannot extinguish. Thus, his rule depends upon deception. He creates religions, institutions, and illusions to keep souls bound to the cycle of matter, fearing that they might awaken and return to the true source of light. Adonaios of Lyon, one of the earliest fathers of the Christian Church, when condemning the Gnostics in his work Against Heresies, preserved this ancient belief. He wrote, "They say that the world was not made by the supreme God, but by a certain demiurge, ignorant and arrogant." Though written as a refutation, Adonaios unintentionally immortalized this doctrine, not realizing he was preserving it for centuries to come. The figure of Yaldabaoth raises a disturbing question. If he truly governs this world, to what extent are our beliefs and systems of power nothing more than reflections of his illusion? What is reality, and what is merely the mask of an imperfect God? And as we delve deeper into his progeny, we encounter other names, each with its own dominion, each reinforcing the invisible chains of the soul. Hi everyone, a quick pause. Did you know that over 70% of you watching are not yet subscribed? Every subscription, like, and comment truly helps the channel keep bringing our mythology stories. If you enjoy the content, support us now. Thank you for your support, and let's return to the story.
Among the 7 Archons brought forth from the arrogance of Yaldabaoth, Iao emerges as an enigmatic figure. In some texts, he appears as Iao, or even associated with the divine Tetragrammaton, a sign of how deeply his presence has been intertwined with human faith throughout the centuries. The Apocryphon of John describes him as one of the rulers of the celestial spheres, possessing the power to imprison souls through rigid law and the weight of imposed order. Iao is the Archon who transforms spirituality into bondage, devotion into blind obedience. His name echoes dangerously close to Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, and many Gnostic scholars insisted that this resemblance was no mere coincidence. To them, Yah represented the wrathful God who demanded sacrifices, ruled with an iron hand, and deceived humanity by presenting himself as the supreme creator. If Yaldabaoth was the root, Yah was the arm of tyranny, perpetuating spiritual enslavement through law and fear. Yet not all of the Archons remained submissive. Among them arose a singular figure, Sabaoth, Unlike his brothers, Sabaoth rebelled against Yaldabaoth when he beheld the light of Sophia. The Apocryphon of John recounts that upon seeing the divine spark, he rejected the demiurge's dominion and was elevated to a different station, even receiving a throne near wisdom herself. Sabaoth, therefore, is not merely a jailer. He represents the possibility of rupture within the very system of the Archons. His story stands as a reminder that even among the rulers of the prison, there exists a chance for redemption. To the Gnostics, he became a kind of guardian of souls, striving to break free, a symbol that the divine spark can shine even where darkness reigns. This duality between Iao and Sabaoth is crucial. On one side, the tyranny of law and submission. On the other, defiance against the demiurge. While Iao imprisons, Sabaoth inspires escape. It is not difficult to see how these figures echoed in later traditions, shaping images of a stern god, yet also of forces that defend humanity. If Iao and Sabaoth represent the extremes of obedience and rebellion, the next archons reveal another face of captivity, dominion through sacred names, titles that confuse and mislead devotion.
After Iao and Sabaoth, the Gnostic tradition leads us to two names that sound familiar, not only because of their resonance, but because of the weight they carry within the very history of humanity's faith: Adonaios and Eloaios. These two archons represent one of Yaldabaoth's most subtle strategies, the appropriation of divine titles. Adonaios echoes, in a deeply unsettling way, the name Adonai, a title used by the Hebrews to refer to the Lord. Eloaios bears a striking resemblance to Elohim, the word used in the Old Testament to describe God as creator. To the Gnostics, this resemblance was no coincidence, but part of the grand deception. The Archons assumed names that evoked holiness so that humanity, in sincere devotion, would offer them worship and energy. The Apocryphon of John names both as rulers of celestial spheres, sustaining the prison through worship itself. While Iao kept mankind bound through law, Adonaios and Eloaios wielded faith as an invisible chain. After all, what prison is more perfect than the one in which the prisoner believes they are worshiping the true God? Irenaeus of Lyon, in his work Against Heresies, recorded that the Gnostics saw these names as deceptions, crafted to mislead humanity. And although he wrote to refute them, his criticism preserved a valuable testimony that by the 2nd century there were already Gnostic Christians who perceived in the Old Testament the influence of the Archons, masquerading as divine beings. This revelation raises an unsettling question. How many prayers across the millennia were lifted not to the Supreme Father of the Pleroma, but to the very jailers themselves? How many times has humanity's genuine faith been diverted, feeding the rulers of this spiritual prison? Adonaios and Eloaios symbolize the power of sacred deception. They have no need for terror or explicit violence. The mask of divinity alone suffices. And thus, among temples and altars, they receive the tribute of human ignorance, tightening the chains that bind us to the material world. Yet the system of the Archons is not limited to law and corrupted faith. There are still other mechanisms, other names that complete the invisible wall surrounding the soul.
Among the lesser-known yet equally feared names are Astaphaios and Adonaios. Though their descriptions in Gnostic writings are brief, their role within the great mechanism of the Archons is essential. They do not appear with the same symbolic weight as Iao or Adonaios, yet they represent the subtle chains that seal off the last paths of escape for the human soul. The Apocryphon of John lists Astaphaios and Adonaios as two of the 7 Archons brought forth by Yaldabaoth, each one ruling over their own celestial sphere. If Yah was tied to law and Adonaios and Eloaios to the mask of the sacred, Astaphaios and Adonaios extended the demiurge's dominion over the cosmic forces themselves. They were the overseers of the stars, the arbiters of fate, the keepers of the invisible tides that govern human life. In the ancient mind, the heavens were far more than physical space. They were maps of destiny. Stars and planets were seen as powers shaping the lives of men. The Gnostics saw in this not mere symbolism, but a tangible prison. Each star ruled by an archon, each celestial movement a hidden chain keeping the soul bound to the cycle of matter. Astaphaios and Adonaios, therefore, were guardians of destiny, masters of the gears that pushed men toward birth and death in ceaseless repetition. This idea echoed in later traditions. Plotinus, the Neoplatonic philosopher of the 3rd century, criticized the Gnostics, but admitted that they described the planets as ruled by hostile powers. To him, it was an exaggeration, but to the Gnostics it was no exaggeration at all. Each planetary sphere was a guarded gate, and only by breaking through these barriers could the soul ascend to the pleroma. Astaphaios and Adonaios symbolize the weight of destiny that suffocates. They remind us that it is not enough to escape religious deception or oppressive law. One must also shatter the cosmic chains that imprison the spirit. With every birth, with every cycle of life, the soul is dragged back into captivity, held fast by these silent wardens. With them, the circle of the 7 great Archons is complete. And before this vast and daunting picture, an inevitable question rises. If the entire cosmos has been structured as a prison, where is the way out? Does a true escape exist? Or is humanity doomed to wander forever within the machinery of Yaldabaoth?
Throughout this journey, we have traversed an invisible universe, ruled by beings who conceal themselves behind sacred names and powerful symbols. The Archons, Yaldabaoth, Iao Sabaoth, Adonaios Eloaios, Astaphaios, and Adonaios are not merely figures of an ancient myth. They embody the unseen prison that has bound the human soul since birth. Each one fulfills their role with chilling precision, preserving the material world as a place of captivity and feeding upon ignorance and fear. Yaldabaoth, the arrogant demiurge, forged the first chain. Iao perpetuated tyranny through law. Sabaoth revealed that even among the jailers there is room for rebellion. Adonaios and Eloaios hijacked faith itself, turning devotion into an invisible shackle. Astaphaios and Adonaios completed the circle, seizing dominion over cosmic forces, the stars, and destiny itself. Together, these 7 Archons constructed an unseen wall separating humanity from the divine light. Yet there remains a thread of hope, woven throughout every tradition, preserved within every ancient manuscript. The spark of divinity still dwells within us. The Gnostics taught that through awakening, consciousness could navigate the labyrinth of the Archons and return to the pleroma, the realm of fullness. Rebellion does not rely upon physical strength, but upon perception, courage, and knowledge. It is in this awakening that true freedom is found. Centuries later, Carl Jung reflected on this mystery, suggesting that the struggle against the Archons could be understood as humanity's inner battle against its own shadows, fears, and illusions. The challenge lies in recognizing these unseen chains, questioning the reality presented to us, and daring to seek truth beyond the veil. And so, the question echoes through the centuries. If the Archons still exist, silent and powerful, how much of our lives truly belongs to us? How many steps, choices, and desires are merely reflections of an invisible prison? As you contemplate this, remember,
Awakening is possible, but it requires vigilance, courage, and the yearning to see beyond appearances. If this story has stirred something within you, if it has sparked unease or fascination, subscribe to this channel. Here we explore the hidden, the mysteries that history and spirituality have cast into shadow. Do not miss the chance to uncover the secrets of the cosmos, to delve deeper into the enigma of the Archons, and perhaps to find what has always been within you. The truth is out there, waiting to be found. And the question remains, are you ready to face it?